Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's time to do another video, and this is going to be a slightly longer one, but also a very important one. Every so often UiPath will release a feature or a product that will change things, like really change things. And this is one of those features. It's in a public preview still, so it's full of errors and stuff like that. But I think it's a glimpse of what is to come in the UiPath platform. And this is how automations were meant to be built from the beginning. And now, or at least soon, we'll be able to do it. So let's have a look. Let's get to it. So what I'm talking about is the new app action feature for Action Center. And it really changes the way you can do Action Center tasks or actions or whatever you call them. Now, the way it used to be was that before we had Action Center, we could build automations that would start and then run until they were done. And that was it. But that's good for only the simplest of tasks. If you're doing any kind of real complex processing, that's not going to work because somewhere in there, you're going to want a human in the loop. And that's what they gave us with Action Center when that came. So with the current version of Action Center, you can start your process. At some point, it doesn't know what to do. It needs input from a human. It will assign a task to that human or user. And that could be either an external task, a form task, or in the case of document understanding, it can be a classification task or a validation task. And of course, UiPath, kind of had a head start there with the document understanding tasks, because those are complex tasks, but it was UiPath's privilege to build those functions into their own product. And everyone else, like myself, we were stuck with only being able to do external tasks or form tasks. And they were good, they just weren't great. So anyways, whatever kind of task you would perform, you would send back an action result to the main process that would then pick up on that and then run until it was done. And that has worked fine. Now, with the next version of Action Center, and that's what I call it, it's not really a new version of Action Center, it's just a new feature. You can do something really, really cool because you can still start your process and it'll run until it gets stuck on some kind of decision point. It'll assign a task to a user, but this is going to be an app task. And an app task is basically a task where you present something to the user, like you would in document understanding, in classification, validation, or as you would in form tasks. You would show something to the user. But what you show to the user now, instead of just being a static image of some version of reality at some point in time, you can now show them an app. So in that app, you could be doing work for 10, 15 minutes, doing all kinds of operations before you are actually ready to make a decision on what kind of action result you send back to the main process. So the user interacts with the UiPath app, and the action result goes back to the main process, and the process can then continue. This is really, really cool because this much more closely emulates how we as humans work with complex processes. So it's really, really exciting. So let's try and have a look at the solution that I'm going to build with you today. So we have a main process. That main process is going to create an app task, and that will show itself inside of Action Center as a new task. And that task is going to present itself not as just a static form or as a document validation or classification. It's going to show itself as, an app, a full-fledged interactive app that you can build in Apps Studio. Then that app, in this case, is going to call another process on the backend, an unattended automation that's going to run on our machine. It's going to get some feedback from that process. And then that feedback is going to go all the way out to the main process, and the process can then continue. So this thing about calling a process from an app is not a new thing, but being able to present that app inside, of course, of an action, that's the new part, and that's the very exciting part. So probably along the way, there's going to be mistakes made. Probably there will be instabilities. Probably things will happen. But by the end of this video, I promise you, you'll have a much better insight into what this can do and how this can help you. So let's just start building. So out here on my desktop, I have what is called an action definition. This is a JSON file that defines both the data going into and out of that action we're going to build, and also the outcomes from that action. So we can see that in this, I have a JSON editor here, and we can see what I have basically is a very simple JSON file here. The scenario for this automation is that my kids keep asking me for money, hypothetically speaking. So I have an automation to handle that. And every time they ask me for money, I am assigned an action, and that action then will present my app that will then run a process on the backend called a credit check, something like that, automation. That gives me feedback into Action Center. And I can then, at my own discretion, choose to either follow that feedback from the credit check or override it and make my own decision on what should happen when my kids ask me for money. So, yeah, that's the best I could come up with. Sorry. So basically, the name of the action is a funds request review. And that is basically an action to review funds requests from my offspring, my kids. And there are three allowed actions. There is approve, deny, and grant loan at horrible interest rate. We'll shorten that just to grant loan. And then we can see that there's a couple of properties in here. The requester name is of type string. That is the name of the child asking me for money. And then there is the amount, which is an integer, and that is the amount of money that the before mentioned child is asking for. And both of these fields are required as per this property down here. So that is my JSON file. You have to build these out yourself. I'm sure there'll be an editor at some point, but right now you have to define them yourself. So we'll just close this tab. So inside of your platform, and I recommend, by the way, that you create a brand new platform for this. I have seen some crazy instabilities and things that just didn't work if I tried to do this in environments where I had previously done a lot of work and maybe renamed some of the tenants and stuff like that. But when I created a brand new environment, things are just working. And this is Community Edition. It's free. You can play around with it. Of course, when you get it all set up, and this is basically a completely blank environment, you need to go to Admin and then click on your tenant. And then you need to make sure in the Services section here that you have actions enabled. And if you don't see it in here, you need to go to Add Services, check off the actions and click Add and Save and whatnot. And then you'll have the actions available here. So when I go into the Action Center here, what I'll need to do, first of all, is to import this action definition. So I'll go to the admin settings, go to the tenant level inside of that, and then we have this action definitions list, and we don't have any because I haven't added any yet. So we'll add an action definition. I'll import from file, and we have on my desktop this funds request review, and I'll click open and create. So now when we create an app that will consume or allow us to perform an action, that app will know what kind of data the action presents and expects back, and also what kind of results or outcomes there are from that action. Now, before we move into that, let me just jump into Studio and show you that process, the credit check process that I've built. This is a very, very simple process. Basically, all it is an else-if statement that basically takes a look at an argument in underscore amount. That's an integer value. And if that amount is less than or equal to 50, it's going to assign to this result variable that it should be fine. You know, anything less than 50, yeah, they can go ahead and have. Don't let them know that. But and then if it's between 50 and 100, sounds like a bad idea. And if it's over 100, then the result will be offer them a loan. There's money to be made here. That's my credit check automation. And then it will log that message as well. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to publish this as any other process. It will be called credit.check. I'll publish it to my normal tenant processes feed and publish it. And then that should take just a second. Okay. And if we go into our orchestrator, we can now create a process from this package. So I'll go into the shared folder, into the automations tab, and here I will add a new process. I will select the package we just deployed, credit.check, and click next, next, and create. Close. And this will run then as an unattended automation. And I have a virtual machine here. I need to start that up, by the way. And so if I run this credit check process, we'll just do that now. It should be ready in just a second here. What we will do is we will hit the started job button over here, and then we'll provide the arguments in here that this process needs in order to run. And all it needs is the amount. So I'll edit the amount and I'll type in 42. And then I'll just wait for this to be completely ready before I hit the start button. So I'll just give it a few seconds for that. All right, so of course the machine had to do a few updates. Now it's ready, so I will click the start button. And what we should then see, of course, is the robot sign into this machine and run this little unattended process. It's going to take a while because this is a really slow machine and it's a virtual machine on top of that, but we'll be patient and just let it run. Okay, so we can see now it's actually signing in. It just took a little while because I just started this virtual machine, but now it's signing in. And the automation ran and now it's signing back out. And if we go to the log file here, or the log of this job, we can see in the log it said that we started the execution of credit check. The result should be fine because it was less than $50, and then the credit check execution ended. So now we have a process that we know will actually work. So what's next? Well, next is building our app. So we'll go into App Studio. And as you can see, we don't have any apps yet. We'll create a new app. I'll just call it, we'll call it funds request or something like that. We'll click create. And for the template, I'll just select the blank page template. And then when we get into the main page here, I'm just going to add a couple of containers because I like those. I'll just add a couple to the top here. And the top one will show the user all of the information about this funds request that they're making. And then in the bottom container, I'm going to add buttons for each of the actions or outcomes for the action. So this should be clear to you in just a few minutes. Also, we want to add an action to this app. And once we do that, it's going to warn us in a second. But once we do that, this becomes an action app. And this cannot be deployed inside of Orchestrator like a normal app. It can only be used from a long-running workflow where we use an activity called the create app task activity. But I'll show you that in just a second. So we'll select the action item here. Click continue on this warning. Select the tenant. And this is the funds request review definition that we imported earlier on from that JSON file. So I'll click add. And what you'll see out here on the left in our App Studio is now we have this action here that describes that funds request review action that we want to use. So back into the main page. And what we're going to do now is inside of these containers, we're going to add some controls. In the top one, we are going to add first, let's see. We will add some input controls. We'll add some text boxes. I'll add one and I will actually copy and paste that. So we have two text boxes. The first one I will call txt name and also enter the label here to be name. And this is the name of the person requesting money from me. And then down here in this one, we are going to change this one to txt amount. And change the label to amount and click save. Then we're going to add also a button. And this button we will call BTN credit check. And the text will be perform credit check. Click save. And then finally below that, we'll also have a label. We'll just have that right at the bottom here. And that label will be LBL credit status. Let's call it that. And the label text will be credit status unknown, because we haven't performed the credit status, the credit check yet. So that's sort of the first part of it. Now, what we want to display in these two text boxes is the name and the amount that we will send into this action from the main process that creates the actual app task. So let's try and bind these two text boxes to that. So we go here and we go to the default text, open the expression editor. And what we can do here is we can type in actions, because we have an action called the funds request review. And inside of that funds request review, we have the requester name. Click save. And then for the amount, we will do the same. Type in actions, funds request review, and then the amount. And since that's an integer value, we want to convert that to a string. And click save. So when this app is shown inside of our new action, that information should now be filled in because it's fed from the main process. So when we perform the credit check, what do we want to do? Well, we want to start a process, the process that we created inside of Orchestrating just a few minutes ago. So on the events tab here, we'll create a new rule. And what we want to do is we want to start a process. What process do we want to start? Well, we don't have any processes yet, so we'll have to add it. Inside of the shared folder, we have the credit check process. I'll select that and click add. And then we'll have to go back to the button credit check and edit the rule again. Now we can select the actual process, drag it in. We can also override some of the inputs. And the input that we want to add here is, of course, the amount. And the amount should then be whatever value we got from that action creation activity in the main process. And when we do that, we now have the process added out here. So when we go into the expression editor, we can type in processes, credit check, and the in amount argument here. So now we can click save. And then this, and then select unattended, because we want this process to run in unattended mode. And then once this process actually is started, what do we want to do? We always want to show a spinner saying, please wait. And when the action is completed, we want to hide the spinner. So we'll change the spinner visibility property to false. There we go. And then we also want to set a value. And the value we want to set is that label showing the credit status. And so we'll select, we'll go in here in the expression editor. We will type in main page, label credit status, value. And we will set that value to the result we get back from the process. So we will type in the expression editor again, processes, credit check, out result. There we go. So all changes have been saved. Let's close this up. So now what we can do is we can run this, or when we run this inside of an action, then we can actually perform the credit check, and that should then update the status with whatever result comes back from that unattended process there. So this is sort of what's new. It's not new in apps, but it's new in Action Center, that you can actually call a process from within that user interface. So once we have that result, now we can make a decision on what we want to do. So now we want these buttons to send the result back to the main process. So we're going to add some controls here. And that will be a button. And I'm going to do something here to this button, because if we go to the General tab here, I want this button to be disabled until the credit status has been performed. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the expression editor here and say that if main page label credit status value is equal to credit status unknown, whatever that evaluates to defines the enabledness, if that's a word, of this button. I'll copy and paste this. Actually, I won't. I'll just save it. Then I'll give this name a button a better name. This will be button approve, and the text will be dad approves request. Click save. Then I'll copy and paste this button a couple of times. Also, I'm going to go to the style tab of the container here and select horizontal, because it just looks a little bit nicer in this case. So the second button now, we don't want that to be button approve 1. We want that to be button deny. And the text on it will be, it's a no, right? So we don't approve of the request. And then this final one will be BTN loan and grant loan to child, right? Something like that. Now, of course, for each of these buttons, we need to set the actual action. So we go to select the dad approves request button, select events, create rule, and then down here at the very bottom, we have the submit action option. And here we can select one of the 3 options or outcome options that we also defined in that JSON file in the beginning. So for this one, we'll select approve, click close. For the next one, we will create a rule, submit action, deny, close. And for the last one, we are going to create a rule, submit action, and grant a loan, and close. So basically, this should be it. If we publish this app, what we can now do inside of Studio is we can create a workflow that creates an app task that will create an action with this app inside of it, that when we click the perform credit check button, calls that first process that we deployed into Orchestrator, and then return the results all the way back once we make a decision on one of the 3 buttons in the bottom there. So let's try and do that. So I'll publish the app. That just takes a few seconds, and you can see it's still working up here, and then in just a second it should show that, which just confirms that now the action app has actually been published. So we're done inside of App Studio. So now we'll go into UiPath Studio, and I have a completely blank project here. And the first thing we want to do inside of UiPath Studio is we want to add a package, and that package will add up here in Manage Packages. We'll go to the official feed and search for persistence. And there's this UiPath persistence activities package. We'll install it and we'll click save. And that's just going to take a second. There we go. And also we want to go to the project options, and enable supports persistence here, because if we don't do that, it won't work. I'll click OK. And now inside of our activities, we should have a new activity called create app, something like that, app task, right? So if I drag that in here, that will create a task inside of Action Center of the type action app or app action, I forget. We'll give it a title. Dad, I need money. The app that we want to run is the funds request app that we just created inside of Apps Studio. I'm going to create a couple of variables here. One is going to be amount, AMT. That will be an integer, and it'll have a default value of 64. Let's just do that. And then the name is going to be a string, and we will just say the default value for that is Joe. Let's pretend I have a kid named Joe. So now we can fill out these two properties down here. The amount, we'll use the amount variable we created. And for the requester name, we will use the name variable that we created. Also over here in the output property, we'll create a new variable by pressing Ctrl K, and we'll just call it my task. This task object is going to be used again now because we are going to wait for the app task and resume. We'll drag that activity in, and we'll enter the my task variable here as the task that we're going to use, and also the task object output variable will set to that same task once it's been modified by whatever result comes back. Finally, we're going to do a message box. And what we're going to show here is simply the my task action, so that we see a message box that should then display what result we selected inside of the action, or inside of the app, inside of the action, inside of Action Center. I think you get the idea. So with a little luck, this should be it. So if we go into Orchestrator and go into Action Center, we can see here that we have no unassigned tasks in my inbox. We don't have any pending tasks. We have nothing of interest here, really. So if I go into Studio now and run this automation, I would be surprised if this worked, but let's try it. We can see that this execution now enters a suspended state. It says here funds execution suspended in 3 seconds. And up here, we can see the resume button. That means that this automation is suspended, and we can click the resume button, but it's not going to resume because we haven't completed the action inside of Action Center. So I'll minimize Studio. We will go into Action Center. We'll do a refresh. And now we have this action saying, Dad, I need money. And it will show the app in here, hopefully with the data that we sent to the action from within our main workflow. And we can see here that we do indeed have Joe as the name and the amount being 64. We can see that the 3 buttons down here are disabled because we haven't performed the credit check yet. Hence the credit status unknown text in this label. So in order to complete this action, first of all, I need to assign this to someone. I'll assign it to myself, as you can with actions. Then we'll see it again, and now we are actually able to click the button. When we do that, let me just bring the virtual machine in the foreground here, so we can see that when we click something inside of an action, inside of an app, inside of an action in Action Center, that this unattended automation will actually start over here on the back end. Again, it's not going to be very fast, but it should give us a result back that we can then see here in the label. Sometimes that label does not refresh until I click somewhere in the user interface. That's just a preview bug thing, but let's try and run it. So I clicked the perform credit check button, and now we can see that it actually does log into the machine back here. We don't get the spinner, but I'm just guessing if I click somewhere in here, we might see the spinner. Now we get the spinner, and the layout here is horrible, but that's how it is. The spinner should then disappear once we get the completion of the process over here on the back end. Let's just give it a few seconds to do that. And now we can see the automation running. It has completed. It'll sign out of the machine. And now we'll be excited to see what happens with the spinner if it actually does disappear. It may or may not. Nah, it doesn't. And the credit status is still unknown. I'm guessing again, if I click somewhere inside of this user interface, it updates, and we see here that the credit should be fine. Now that the credit check has been performed and we have a result, the buttons are enabled, and we can then select, okay, do we want to give Joe $64? I don't know about that. $64, depending on the currency, of course. I'm going to say, I'll loan it to you at a horrible, horrible interest rate. So I'll click the Grant Loan to Child button. That should then send the grant loan action result back to the main process. I'll do that. I'll ask it not to ask me every time I complete an action. So I'll complete the action. The action basically disappears. And if we go back to Studio now, into this suspended workflow, and now click resume, hopefully we'll see a message box that I will grant a loan to Joe. So, is this a big deal? I think it is. I really think it is. It's still in a public preview. It's full of bugs, instabilities. You know, I've played with this for a week now, and only like today or last night maybe, I actually got it to work somewhat decently. But once this is finished, it's going to really change the way you can even think automation and think human in the loop, because you are able to give much more complex tasks to those suspended states where the process can't do anything without getting some feedback from a human. So I hope you liked this video. It was a little bit long, I'm sorry. I hope you liked it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. It really does make a difference when you spend this kind of time making these videos. And also, if you like the kind of content that I'm making, you hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and all of that. If you have any questions also to this video, just put them in the comments below and I'll try to answer them. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to watch some of these videos as well. So thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time.